Hello, my name is Father Lawrence Jagfeld. I am a Franciscan of the Sacred Heart Province and the administrator of CUSA, an apostolate of persons with chronic illness and/or disability. On the 17th Sunday in Ordinary Time, in the B cycle of the lectionary, we stop reading from Mark's Gospel and pick up John's Gospel for this Sunday and for the next 4 Sundays. We read almost in its entirety chapter 6 of John's Gospel, which contains the story of the feeding of the multitude, as well as the discourse known as the Bread of Life discourse. This particular chapter in John's Gospel is deemed so important to Catholic theology that the Church gives us an opportunity to consider it and meditate upon it over these 5 Sundays in this cycle of the lectionary. We are all familiar with the story. Jesus went across the Sea of Galilee. A large crowd followed him because they saw the signs he was performing on the sick. He went up on the mountain, and there he sat down with his disciples. The Jewish feast of Passover was near. When Jesus raised his eyes and saw that a large crowd was coming to him, he said to Philip, "Where can we buy enough food for them to eat?" He said this to test him, because he himself knew what he was going to do. Philip answered him, 200 days' wages worth of food would not be enough for each of them to have a little. One of his disciples, Andrew, the brother of Simon Peter, said to him, "There is a boy here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. But what good are these among so many?" Jesus said, "Have the people recline." Now there was a great deal of grass in that place, so the men reclined, about 5,000 in number. Jesus took the loaves, gave thanks, and distributed them to those who were reclining, and also as much of the fish as they wanted. When they had had their fill, he said to his disciples, "Gather the fragments left over, so that nothing will be wasted." So they collected them and filled 12 wicker baskets with fragments from the 5 barley loaves that had been more than they could eat. When the people saw the sign he had done, they said, "This is truly the prophet, the one who is to come into the world." Since Jesus knew that they were going to come and carry him off to make him king, he withdrew again to the mountain alone. This particular event is recorded in all 4 of the Gospels. Because it is recorded in all 4, we have become quite familiar with it. But it's interesting to note that John adds some very important details that are found nowhere else. He really elaborates upon this particular event. First of all, he tells us that it happened around the time of Passover, which immediately signals connotations of that first Passover when Egypt let the Israelites go and they ate manna in the desert as they moved toward Israel. St. John also records a conversation between Jesus and Philip. Why Philip? Earlier in the Gospel, St. John tells us that Philip was from Bethsaida. Bethsaida is a word that means the house of fish. Obviously, St. John wanted to make this connection between Philip and the food that was given to these people. John also records that it was 5 barley loaves. The barley harvest was right around the time of Passover. But barley was the bread of the poor. And it also was the kind of bread that the prophet Elisha fed to the people in a reading that was used at the beginning of the Liturgy of the Word. These details add a real rich tradition to St. John's Gospel account of this feeding of the multitude. And that tradition connects this particular event to the faith of the Jewish people. It connects this event to the Passover, to the feeding of manna in the desert, and to their prophet Elisha. That connection, as we will see as the discourse unwinds in the following Sundays, are really important to the understanding of who Jesus is as the bread of life. Jesus will make many references to the manna, to the people who were in the desert feeding on this food, and to the fact that that food was perishable, whereas the food he gives us is imperishable. As we continue to meditate on this discourse, we are really completely overwhelmed by the wonderful gift of the Eucharist, which is another detail that St. John adds to this account. St. John tells us that Jesus took the bread, blessed it, broke it, and then had the disciples distribute it. These are the very words that the Synoptic Gospels use to record the Last Supper. As we all know, St. John's Gospel does not include an account of the institution of the Eucharist at the Last Supper. But by using these words, that Jesus took the bread, blessed it, broke it, and distributed it, it is clear that St. John is giving us his version of the institution of the Eucharist. The bread of life is our food. It is the source and summit of our faith. For the next few weeks, our church will ask us not only to express our gratitude for this wonderful mystery of the Eucharist, but it will also ask us to plumb the depths of our souls to see if we ourselves have become that bread of life, to see if we have become what we eat, to see if we have become the body of Christ. For more information about CUSA, please go to our website at www.cuson.org.